I was at first really kind of worried that I didn't have my own style because I know, as everyone says, it's very important for an artist to have their own style. And I was stressed that I did not have this at first. But what I learned, which I feel like a lot of people knew and never told me this magic secret.
Welcome to And I Made It, a podcast where I chat with animators in the animation industry to discuss the ins and outs of their creative process, from sketch phase to final renders. I'm your host, Mitch Fern, and today we're sitting down with Helen Ratner, a motion graphics art director and designer creating dreamlike scenes through rotoscoping and collage. During this episode, we go into what it's like freelancing as a motion designer coming from advertising, what inspires their current animation style, different stages when working with clients, and of course, we get a step-by-step of how Helen creates these mesmerizing motion graphic collages she's so well known for today. So, with all that being said, let's see how they made it. All right, here we go. How's it going?
Hey, good. Nice to be with you, Mitch.
So, yeah, why don't you start off with just telling us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Sure. So I'm currently a freelance animator and motion designer and art director and motion director, all the things. But I have a bit of an interesting background where I actually started as an art director working in advertising for a long time before really falling in love with motion graphics and kind of teaching myself a lot of stuff. And over the years, I've really fallen in love with kind of two distinct styles. The first is hand-drawn animation with an emphasis on rotoscoping and cell effects. And then the second is taking real video footage, cutting it up, and then kind of creating like these collage effects out of it in a new way.
Yeah, how would you, in like a single sentence, how would you describe your style?
Ooh, okay. I think my style is very surreal, quirky, trippy, and sometimes very bizarre, but also kind of cloaked in this pleasing pastel color palette.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I feel like your stuff is very like distinct and you definitely have like come up with your own style. Because I see a lot of rotoscoping artists and stuff, but I feel like I haven't seen anybody swing with it where you just go all in with like this is my style, kind of like utilizing the ability to rotoscope, but then almost like collaging it together and stuff. So like, where
Mhm.
did you feel like you got that style? Like, what was the first piece that you feel like you did that you were like, I think I'm like onto something here?
So I think the whole process kind of really started for me in the end of 2019. I was working an agency job and it was pretty straightforward, and I didn't feel like I was getting all that creatively fulfilled. So I decided to set myself the task of creating one short animation a week and then to hold myself accountable. I was going to post it online to Instagram to be like, here's kind of an end goal. And so I actually started off with more of the video collage style rather than the rotoscoping because I'd been working in After Effects for a few years at this point. And so I just really dove in. I started cutting up footage. This was kind of before the roto tool is what it is today. So it was a lot of just like spending time pathing things out, manually cutting it out. And after that, I saw one artist. I'm about to butcher her name. She's Swedish, Caroline Kjellberg, I think. And she did sort of a lot of like how to's on an iPad, and she made it look really easy to do. And hand drawn animation is something that I'd always wanted to get into, but I don't feel very confident when it comes to my ability to draw. And from everything and everyone I've ever heard, if you want to get into hand drawn cell animation, you have to be fantastic at drawing. You have to be able to draw something from every angle and every dimension and any which way. And that did not feel like it was possible for me.
Yeah.
But then when I did end up getting an iPad and I started drawing in it. And it felt really natural and fun for me. And so I didn't initially get into the rotoscoping. I just did some quick like cell animation doodles. And I think I watched some online tutorials about keyframes and sort of like how to ease and stuff. But I didn't really dive into rotoscoping until I realized that my particular style, I wanted stuff that was kind of done in higher fidelity. And since I could not draw in that higher fidelity that I wish to attain, I realized that I could just rotoscope and take footage and and kind of cut it up and almost use my video collage style as the basis to then my rotoscoping. So oftentimes, not always with all my cell animations, but I will start with footage and then I cut up that footage. I kind of create something new, and then I end up rotoscoping it in the end and kind of tying it all back together.
Okay, cool. You were saying at the beginning that you started off doing more like collage video stuff. Was that with
Mm-hmm.
like traditional, like you were taking video, or was that like in After Effects? You were like cutting things up.
It was in After Effects. I was cutting things up.
Okay.
I am not a photographer or a videographer. I do take videos all the time for reference, but honestly, I was getting most of my footage just online. I was ripping it off videos or stealing it from wherever I could and running with it. There was an artist that really influenced me at that time. His name is Sholem, and he does a lot of like cut up surreal things with like heads exploding and stuff. And he had posted a few like really quick tutorials on how to mask things out. And I was like, all right, let me try this. And I feel like that's where I really began to gain traction because I was having fun with the process. And I feel like time was flying by and I started to actually make these animations that I really liked. And I was at first really kind of worried that I didn't have my own style because I know, as everyone says, it's very important for an artist to have their own style. And I was stressed that I did not have this at first.
Yeah, I think everyone goes through that.
Definitely. But
Yeah.
what I learned, which I feel like a lot of people knew and never told me this magic secret, and realized that there were certain colors I was gravitating towards, certain subject matters, and lo and behold, I did indeed have my own style.
Nice. Yeah, do you feel like when you started doing like the rotoscoping stuff, because I feel like you tend to lean towards like similar color palettes and stuff. How quickly do you feel like you picked up on like putting the colors together and being like, this is cool? Like, is it just because you want like the colors to just pop, or did you ever experiment with other color palettes?
Yeah, definitely. And if you look through some of my work, I have other color palettes in there. It's funny because a lot of my work is mostly in pastels, when really my own personal preference for color is like very bright neon colors.
Oh yeah,
So it's interesting that my work ended up being softer and more muted when my actual preference is like way brighter. And I don't remember exactly when I came upon that color palette, but I know I kind of hit it and things felt right. I think I remember starting off not wanting my humans to have like real, flesh tones. I wanted like weird blues and
yeah,
purples and like things that were a bit more surreal. So I think it started with like what flesh tones kind of work. My outlines are mostly black at the time, so it was a lot of it was based on like contrast and how could I make things pop. And then once I had kind of like a set palette, it was partially out of like laziness that I just kept rolling with it and using the
yeah.
same palette, but I also did enjoy how it looked and I knew how to work with it. And I think that is also something that kind of helped create my style with rotoscoping, is having the same color palette that I mostly use. And even when I stray away from it, um, there are still just sort of like general rules in terms of like contrast. And I try to limit the color palette at any given time. So even if like a animation is getting really complex, I try to use no more than like 4 or 5 colors and then maybe tints of those colors to help unify everything.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask what your like reasoning was for limiting it, but yeah, you answered.
Yeah, I mean, I can get more into that. I think color theory is something that I learned briefly in college, but to be honest, I never really felt that it was my strong suit. And then now there's all these awesome programs that can like set up color palettes for you or show you exactly what the contrasting color is or make like a tertiary palette for you. So I started playing around with some of those. And then one thing that I learned very quickly is using a limited color palette with as few colors as possible while still allowing contrast really for me yielded the best results and helped make things very like punchy and clear.
Cool. Yeah, I'm kind of like similar. I used to like draw just in black and gray for the longest time, but I loved
Mm-hmm.
color work, and I was like, but every time I would do it, it's like color theory is like a whole other skill you need to learn. Like it
Oh, it's
feels
so
easy.
complicated.
Yeah, when you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, just like adding color, and then you start doing it, and you're like, why does this look bad? This doesn't look good. And then you have to like figure out like which colors and like tones work with each other. Was it in school where you got introduced to After Effects?
No, I didn't get introduced to After Effects till I was already working in the
Oh,
advertising
okay.
industry. And at that time, I was working mostly in like Illustrator and Photoshop and InDesign. And I think there was something in me that always loved animation because I remember even in college doing like short animations in Photoshop. using like the rudimentary timeline there. And one of my colleagues was like, "Hey, have you seen After Effects? You're gonna love After Effects," because I
Yeah.
think at one point I was even doing like flash animations in InDesign, which is horrifying, but that was a thing that once existed.
I didn't even know you could do
And
that.
yeah, it was rough. But she showed me After Effects and she's like, "Look how easy it is to make stuff move." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is it. This is what I need in my life." But After Effects is like a very complicated beast, as I'm sure many of you know. So it took me years, honestly, to feel really comfortable in it, especially without any formal training. But I think the way I went about it and the way I know a lot of other people go about it is like if you kind of have a vision in mind, like something general you want to do, and then you just kind of look up tutorials to do that exact thing, and then over time you just kind of amass knowledge,
Yeah.
and from there it gets easier.
Yeah. 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 I got super lucky that I got forced into taking a class in college for After Effects. And at the time, I
Nice.
was like, I remember asking that teacher, I was like, do I need to do this? And they're like, yeah, it's like part of the degree. Like you're in, like it's a mandatory
Yeah.
class. And I was like, at first I was kind of bored with it. And then
Hmm.
what's funny is that it's probably the program I use more than any other program still to
Yeah, I was
this
about to
day.
ask you, do you use it a lot now?
I still use it just for like sprucing things up at the end for some of my work.
Hmm.
Not to start making this podcast about me, but yeah, I mean, I always end up using it. I used to use it more with some of my kind of like looping animations, but then I started using Procreate Dreams to do those and like mostly animate in that. And then, but I'll still just go into After Effects to add some cool little particle effects, stuff to make it look like it has like a hand drawn wiggle effect that I like
Oh
to
yeah.
use. But
Nice.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's so nice that it's a program that's been around for so long. Like you were saying, you can just look up tutorials for anything, and it's just like
It
you'll
goes
you'll figure it
so
out.
deep. Like you
Yeah,
took a class in it, I'm sure you probably know its steps more than I do. But I use it probably for almost every project, like compositing, and I put music in, and yeah, all those special effects. And then of course anything with the video collage, like that entire project lives in After Effects. And sometimes they get really complicated and there'll be like hundreds of layers. But
yeah.
yeah, I love it. I don't know what I would do without you, After Effects. Thanks, Adobe.
So when you either get handed a project or just start like your own personal project, and you come up with the idea, like what's the first thing you do? Like do you like sketch it like the idea down in a sketchbook, or do you just like go straight into a
Mhm.
program?
I guess I'm gonna start it with the personal project side because that's more fun, and then I'll take you to the client side because it's slightly different. But basically, because I used to get myself on this like once a week posting thing, I like always had to be coming up with ideas, and inspiration, it does not always strike on demand, but I've learned you can like give yourself the sort of setup to have it strike when you need it to. So one thing that I did that really helped me was I started keeping just like a notes app on my phone, and anytime I had like a snippet of an idea or even something weird, even if it was one word like mermaid, I would
Mhm.
add it in. I would take photos and add them in there. And then anytime when I had like I could like kind of feel the creative juices flowing, I would sit down and I would like look at this notes app, and then I would kind of come up with a specific idea for the animation. From there, sometimes it would start in a sketchbook and I would sketch out compositions, but especially early on, more often than not, it would just start with like, what footage can I find that basically fits this idea, or what can I shoot that will be great reference for me? And then I would kind of work backwards from my idea and the footage together. And so there was like the symbiosis of like, I started with an idea, but some of the footage I needed was really specific, or I could only film it in specific ways. So then I'd kind of have to work backwards. And it was this like back and forth of like, how do I make this idea come to life in the way I want using like the resources and tools I have? And then I would say for like client process, usually I'll do a deep dive into their brand and then any competitor brands and sort of look at like what are maybe general like tropes out there in the field of what I'm creating, and then kind of like almost make a list of them and then think about things that like haven't been explored at all in this area. And then it's usually kind of like the intersection of these two things that lead to my best ideas. So then I'll come up with ideas next. And then oftentimes it involves a lot of like sketching and then storyboarding in Illustrator, Photoshop, or sometimes even in Procreate
Yeah.
before the process moves on.
Okay. So for your client work, there's times that you have to do like you storyboard your work and then you like send that over to the client so they can just. So what do your storyboards look like?
Oh
Is it
yeah.
just like a sketch? Because Because your stuff is like, yeah, it's rotoscoped. So like, what does a rotoscoped
I
storyboard kind of
know.
look like?
So it depends on the project. If it's very footage based, like I did a music video where I had control over what I was shooting, and that was really fun. And those storyboards were just really rough, like, it was a lot of like heads that were kind of getting split open, people dancing on these platforms made of these heads and everything. So it was just very roughly sketched out. Like a head was just like a circle, and then I'd have lines showing motion and I'd explain it,
Okay.
and everything was like color coded to be the different characters and everything. So that was like the roughest storyboard, if you will, just because of the nature of like I needed to keep things loose and I didn't want to have to like draw an accurate head so many
Yeah.
times. And then other times when I am really beholden to footage that I can find, it is kind of a bit more of a process up front where I start by looking up that footage. I have to source that footage. I have to create these compositions. And then from there, like once I'm sure that that footage can work for my needs as a rotoscope, um, then I can kind of create the storyboards backwards from there. So even though I'm using footage that I'm tracing over a lot of the times, that's most of the time like only one part of the process, because then I'll like
Yeah.
make a crazy pattern out of it. I'll like warp it. I add like special effects, all this other stuff. So I do usually like start by finding the footage, and then I make the storyboards based off of like just keyframes within that footage.
So once you get that first process done and you like send it over to the client, do you then do like just line work and then you send that over before you start adding colors and stuff? Also, what other programs do you use besides After Effects with like rotoscoping?
Yeah. Okay, so I would say for the client project question, I'll tackle first. That one, it really depends on like the client, what they're looking for, how big the project is, what their budget is, how many rounds they can do, all that. But usually, if it's like a bigger project and they give me more creative control, then I'll usually start by just having like general ideas for them. And then I like to show more than one idea, and then like really rough storyboards, have them choose one. Sometimes it's even just a written sentence, depending on how much time we have. And then from there, I will usually show them specific boards with line work. Honestly, even sometimes color, because that doesn't always take me so long. Sometimes not color. It really depends, again, how many rounds I have. And then if motion is something really specific to this, sometimes I'll even show them the reference footage that I'm using. And I'll kind of show them like my Frankenstein collage, like footage that I rotoscope over before the final thing. And then the keyframe of like, this is what it will look like rotoscoped. And then to tackle your next question, what tools do I use? So these have kind of changed over the years. When I first started working on an iPad, I was working with Procreate, and I love Procreate, but it is not great for animation. I can't speak for Procreate Dreams. I haven't really dabbled with that yet, but
Mm.
at least the initial Procreate is like a little clunky.
Yeah, it's just like an extra
Fantastic
like
for
added
illustration.
tool that they have there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started there, and then I really fell in love with Rough Animator, which I used for so many years. And it's like a very simple tool. It's really straightforward. It's not buggy, which is like huge because all the other apps at some point or other have like a bug and you lose work and it's really annoying. Rough Animator is just like rock solid. It's awesome. There's one guy
Yeah.
that makes it, like Jacob, I forget his last name. He's like super nice. I remember at one point I had a glitch and I was like, I think I just emailed him and I was like, hey, can you add this feature, do this thing? And then he did it. It was
Oh, you
great.
added the feature. I was actually gonna say I met the guy who made it at just art meetup in Williamsburg a few months
Oh
ago.
my God, he's like a celebrity to me. Let him know that I'm his biggest fan. I used Rough Animator for so long.
Really, that's crazy. Yeah, I ended up downloading it after he told me about it, but yeah, it was one of those just like crazy New York like experiences of like just going to this little art meetup, just like a drink and draw thing. And I saw him, I like walked past him and he was like using the app. And I was just like, hey, what like animation app is that? And he was like, oh, it's one I developed. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, it's called Rough Animator. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I've heard of Rough Animator before, but I haven't used it. And then, yeah,
No,
he
I
just like
did
told
so
me
many
about it.
like professional non-rough animations in Rough Animator.
Wow.
It was great.
Well,
But I
shout out
know
to him.
like, yeah, so really if you see him again, let him know I'm his biggest fan. But I know like industry standard is often like Toon Boom Harmony and then Clip Studio Paint. So eventually I got into Clip Studio Paint, which is far more complex. I do love it. That's like my standard in what I use now. Just because you can animate everything in vector, it has way more tools. Like it
Oh,
just
really?
makes
In Clip
sense
Studio?
overall. hmm And I just work on the iPad version. I don't even work on like the desktop version, but it has,
Oh, well.
again, it's very dense. I've only been working in it maybe like a year and a half. So, I've only scratched the surface. I'm sure I'll find even more. But that one's really great. And then, for a short period of time, I was animating in CaliPeg, which I really like for a lot of its features. The only problem is, again, I haven't animated in it for years. I think it's better now, but at the time they were really glitchy. So I lost projects and like that was a huge bummer. But
Oh,
they had really nice brushes and like a pretty easy workflow from what I remember.
nice. I don't think I ever used CaliPeg.
Yeah.
Is that one?
But for anyone that's new and just looking to get into it, I highly recommend Rough Animator. I think it was like $5. It's so easy. Yeah, it's the best. I
Yeah, I
mean, Clip
haven't
Studio Paint's
dived
awesome
too
too.
much into it, but I need to try it out a little bit more. It's always so hard getting into new programs. It's like, especially when you're so used to other programs that are similar, because you're like, this is like the other program, except everything's moved around, and like now I need to figure out what
Yeah.
these each tool does. It's like,
I do think Rough Animator is the most intuitive and easiest because it is really dead simple.
wow,
And, for that reason, I ended up having to kind of like graduate on the Clip Studio Paint, but it still holds a special place in my heart.
yeah. I mean, that I guess that's how I feel with about Procreate Dreams, and
Mhm.
that was a lot of people's complaint was that it's too simple. They're like, I can't find it. Like, where is everything? Similar to how like Procreate is, right? The like you kind of have to like figure out where all the tools are, because they
Yeah,
kind
they're
of just give
hidden.
you this blank canvas thing. But for my ADD brain, it's like perfect because I don't feel
Oh
like
man,
I'm
then Clip
getting
Studio Paint's
distracted.
gonna be overwhelming. You're gonna open it and it looks like a full on like Photoshop, like all the toolbars everywhere
Yeah,
surrounding
yeah.
it, and you're like, what do I do? That one is the least intuitive in my opinion. I've been using it a year and a half and I still don't know how to do some basic things, and I don't know if
Yeah.
they're possible. I don't know. They probably are,
Yeah, for my brain, it's
but
just like, I don't know, programs that have too many tools. Because I always end up just using like the same four tools usually in my work. So it's like when there's all these other tools, it's just distracting. It's just like, I don't
yeah,
know, it's hard for my brain to focus on what I need to get done.
that's fair. I will say, I started drawing though, like in vector, and that was a game changer for me in terms of like just kind of scalability.
Yeah.
And then also you can like they have a vector redraw line that's really nice. So you can like copy over a frame and then tweak it ever so slightly. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'll need to check that out then because there's not that many animation programs that do vector.
Yeah, they really aren't. I think it's mostly like Clip Studio Paint and Toon Boom, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think Adobe Fresco just started doing it.
Oh, good for you, Adobe Fresco.
They started I guess maybe it was like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. They started adding some like animation tools, but that was another one that I couldn't really figure out because their timeline's like vertical instead of horizontal, and
Oh,
like
that's
that
chaotic.
already bothered me.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't like that.
Yeah, I'm like,
But
what? Why are all the layers?
I would love if Adobe came out with something that I could draw with on my iPad easily and transfer it over. Like I've
Yeah,
used Illustrator on my iPad a lot, and that's pretty nice. I like it, but I don't know. I haven't found anything for animation that's as good.
yeah, and they have a Photoshop for the iPad, right? Do that?
Probably. I think they have Photoshop and like Illustrator. I can't imagine they have After Effects. That would be
Yeah, I
ill
think that would work.
advised to just say the least.
Will say that Procreate Dreams does such a better job at rendering. You know how in After Effects it's like any little change you have to like let it re-render, and it just like
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you have a better computer than I do, but it just like
I did.
slows
I
everything down.
literally souped up my computer just for this. I got a
Oh,
new one
really?
last year and I went crazy and I got like the most internal RAM. And I will say I've never had a rendering issue again. And it's a
Oh,
game
nice.
changer. It's really nice. But
That's
I
my
know it's
next
not feasible
big
for
purchase for
everybody.
sure. Yeah.
It's worth it.
I definitely need it. I was my last guess. He has like four PCs that he uses during his process, but he's working with like CGI
I was about to say
stuff
that he
and
must be a
like
3D artist.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, at one point he was like, "Yeah, I have like four machines, and I like switch them on, and like sometimes I just use two." I was like, "Machines? Do you mean like PCs?" He's like, "Yeah, I have like four PCs." I'm like, "That's
Yeah,
crazy."
I've seen these setups. They're so intense.
Yeah,
I'll actually tell you about my setup because it's kind of crazy. A lot of people are
yeah,
like, no way. So most people think that I would have like a double screen desktop for all the work I'm doing, especially in After Effects. I do all of my work on my laptop, my like 15-inch laptop, because
really.
I used to work on a desktop and I just like to move around too much and kept realizing that like I wasn't even working at it. So I just gave up and got used to working on a laptop, and I honestly got so efficient at it that I wouldn't know what to do with all the extra screen space.
So you do like all the After Effects on the laptop?
I know that's the craziest, but I got really good at like resizing all of the screens, and like I have my own workspace saved that I'm like, don't ever mess with this.
Yeah. But then you're doing all the drawing stuff on your iPad. So it's like your
Yeah, for
iPad
the most part,
laptop setup.
yes, exactly.
That's
And
cool
since I'm
though.
doing
That's
most stuff on my iPad, I don't even have the big iPad. I have the mini one because again, portability is really big for me. I like to be able to animate on the go.
yeah. Yeah, that's been a game changer for me too. As I've been like putting more of my process into just using an iPad. It's just so
Nice.
nice to be like, where should I work today? Rather than just being like, oh, I need to work, so I have to like sit in my room all day and
Yeah.
work on my desktop. Do you have a favorite brush that you like to use?
I am really boring and I like to use a very standard brush that's just like a round tip end and it's got some stabilization on it and I can change the width and that's about it. Sometimes I'll get crazy and use like the gouache pen tool brush thing in Clip
Yeah.
Studio Paint or in Calipeg. I used to use like one that just was like nicely tapered and that you could have some pen pressure with. But honestly, I don't know. I should probably do a deeper dive in brushes. And then sometimes I'll add texture to my work, but I've just kind of come up with like 10 textures that I kind of use for everything and I mix and match them. And yeah, so I haven't yet found the need to do a deep dive in brushes, but someday.
Okay. So you're not one of those artists that like make their own specific brush.
Oh, I do,
Yeah.
but I would say it's a very basic brush that I'm making.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I like just started getting kind of into like making my own brushes because I have like, I don't know, certain looks that I'm trying to go for. It always bothers, like I
Yeah.
love asking the brush question though because there's so many times I feel like any other artist can relate to this, but so many times you see some person's artwork and you're like they have like a super cool brush that they're using and you can never find it. And a lot of people
They
don't
probably made
answer.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A
That's
lot of
like
times
their
people are
secret
like,
sauce.
yeah,
For brushes, I love Procreate the most. I think it's like the most intuitive, and I've created some of my favorites there. Unfortunately, not my favorite for animating, so I don't
hmm.
often use them.
I guess kind of going back to a little bit of your process with clients. When you're working with different clients, is it usually like they come to you and they're just like, here's some footage, and then we just want you to do your thing on top of it? Or do they usually have like a pretty specific idea?
I've had it both ways. Yeah, I've never had a client come to me and say, "Hey, we have this footage, will you rotoscope it?" Or I guess if that has happened, I've had to turn it down because it's usually like something that would be so intense to rotoscope. I think that happened once and I was like, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." But typically they'll come to me and kind of say like, "Hey, this is our problem or these are our deliverables, this is what we need solved." And then I love starting kind of from the idea phase of things because um I think a lot of times people aren't necessarily like just coming to me for my style. I think they're coming to me for like kind of like the quirky, surreal aspect that is in my art. So oftentimes it's like I'm ideating with them. They might have something like a nugget of an idea, and then I can like help them grow it and make it something more specific. But it's rare that they're coming to me and saying like, "Hey, can you rotoscope this exact footage?" Sometimes it'll happen where they're like, you can work in tandem with like a live action director and then animate over that footage. I've had that happen, but yeah, not really like here is the rote footage and like this is exactly how we need you to animate it. And I wouldn't say I'm a rotoscope artist in that way.
Have you ever had a time that you've been like collaborating with a client or just, I don't know if you ever just like collaborate with other artists that they ended up like elevating your work in an unexpected way?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
I would say like a lot of the projects I do, I'm often working with like, really talented, smart people. And so even though a lot of like my personal work is kind of done just me, and I have collaborated with some artists, I love working with other people. And I think that's where like the best ideas come from when, you get to kind of like brainstorm with somebody else or, uh, kind of get some more feedback. When it's just you, you might end up someplace and be like, oh, I'm happy here. And then having someone else be like, oh, can you do another round and push it in this direction you would have never thought of always yields really interesting results. And then the artists that I have collaborated with, I mean, they've definitely made each piece I've made with them so much better, I think.
Yeah. Nice. I did want to ask about when you are making most of your pieces, are you animating each piece individually and then like exporting it with a transparent background?
Yeah. So again, it really depends on the project, but honestly, everything always starts for me for the most part in After Effects, and that's where I will kind of cut up footage, put it together, and from there I'll like export my reference sort of footage on separate layers, and then I animate it. And if it's something really complex where I know I'm going to use like multiple colorways, I'm going to be doing a lot with this footage, making a lot of patterns or like stacking things on top of layers, then I export everything separately, which really helps. So by that, I mean like not only like each element that's in the composition, but each element is getting exported, like just the outline layer, color fill one, color fill two, color fill three, like
Oh,
however many
really?
colors I use. Yeah, it makes it so much easier to like change colors later and like experiment with different colorways because like you already have those blocks kind of filled in. And you can do that really easily in After Effects. And then it just gives you a lot more like freedom, and you can kind of like do a lot more in After Effects if you have everything separated.
Okay. So how are you doing that? How are you exporting like just the line work and then just the color work? And does it let you color things in a layer underneath, like a timeline underneath it? Okay.
Yep. So, I mean, again, depends on the program you're using. I guess I'll talk
Yeah.
to Clip Studio Paint because that's what I use right now. But basically, I will start off with the outline layer and I do the outline for everything typically. And then after that, I will create a new layer underneath. Even though I'm doing the drawing in raster, when working in Clip Studio Paint, you got to do the color mostly, or I'm working in vector, you got to do the color in raster. So then I'll take like the paint bucket tool. There's different settings you can play with, kind of like which layer it looks at. And then I just like use a paint bucket tool to fill in from there. Sometimes I'll like do another pass of just like drawing in shadows and other lines. And then when I'm exporting, I just have to like turn on each layer manually and export it like that. I haven't figured out if there's like a way to batch export yet. But yeah, I just
Yeah,
kind of do
especially
it
with
one at a time.
animation. I can't think of a program that I've found that does that yet.
Yeah, that'd be nice though.
Yeah, that would be
Clip
nice.
Studio Paint, though, if you're listening, there is one function I would love. When I export or import, just let me airdrop it straight to my computer. That would be so nice.
The project file you're saying, or the just the export
Like
of the.
the image sequence export. I have to
Oh,
like
okay.
save it to my files and then export it from there.
Yeah, AirDrop is amazing. With
I know
my
it's such a
a
game
lot of my
changer.
animation stuff now, it's like it's just so nice to drop it to my phone and then or even I mean I guess I still use Google Drive a lot. Shout out Google Drive.
Yeah, me too.
Mm.
That one's a good one. If you want me to get into the nitty gritty, I can share a
Oh
presentation that
yeah,
I shared for Pictoplasma. Hang on. The sun
yeah.
is like
Let's do
coming
that.
after me. I gotta run away from it. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So I'll show you how I made this animation of this dog's head that's kind of been cut up. And then I have one after that walks through my rotoscope process. So this one gets like pretty nitty gritty. But basically, for step one, you're going to want to find your footage and images. And the thing that I really look for here is the background, because for step two, you're going to have to cut everything out. So when I say look at the background, I mean look for things that have like a contrasting color from the background. So you can, if it's a still image, just use the lasso tool. Or if it is footage, if it's on green screen, even better. If it's a solid color, you can still probably key it out. Then once you have everything cut out, you can split the head in half. So to do this, I start off by cutting the dog's head, separating it from the neck by just using the path tool and kind of generally following the line of motion. You don't have to be super precise in this, as long as it like basically just follows the head motion. It'll look accurate. And then same with sort of that slice shape. So I imagine like what would it look like if I cut this dog's head vertically, and then I just put in that path shape following like the edges of the head and just follow the motion using manual keyframes. And then I add in a shadow to get in some depth. Then next, we're going to put all the goodies inside the head. So for this, I just use keyframes to make a lot of those still images move. And then I decided that a solid color in the back of the dog's head wasn't really cutting it for me. So I added in an image of the Alps, but made sure to keep in that gradient for that depth. And for step five, I'm going to add a background and loop. And often for my video collage animations, you'll see that I use solid color backgrounds because the videos themselves are really dense and there's so much going on that I don't really want the background to distract from them. So here I went with this kind of purple color. And then I loop the dog's head so it can open and close forever and ever. And then step six, I'm a sucker for patterns. So I just duplicated the dog's head, and then I used a null object to make all the dog's heads move up together and loop forever. And then I'll walk you through my rotoscoping process
Yeah.
with one of my more complex animations, which is like the pills in the hand that kind of bloom into flowers. So here again, step one, we're going to find or shoot reference footage. And what is important here is not so much the background, but how clear your image is itself, because you're going to have to find the edges and trace over it. So I shoot a lot of my own footage, and some things that are important to keep in mind when shooting your own footage are things like lighting and camera speed. So I often shoot with like bright, direct sunlight, or if I want a more contrasting look with harsher shadows, sometimes I'll do like side lit or like a spotlight. And then I often shoot in slow motion, which just captures more frames. And don't worry if the speed is not correct, because in the next step, we're going to compose the scene in After Effects. So here you can do things like mess with the timing, speed things up, slow them down, take out frames. And this is where you'll see I kind of make this like Frankenstein collage. So I'll stack in all of the different pieces of footage. So for this, it would be like the flowers blooming on the hand, making sure they line up with the pills, making sure the timing of everything looks good. And then I'll turn down the opacity on everything so I can like see through and kind of line things up during this stage. And then once I'm happy with the way everything's looking and the motion, I export each layer separately by itself at full opacity so that we can get into the most fun step, which is the actual rotoscoping. So I start off by bringing everything. Here you can see me animating in Rough Animator. And I brought in all of my pieces of footage first, and then I'll make a new layer and I'll do the outline. So one thing that's important, I always start off with maybe like one key frame, and I'll do the outline of the entire image just to kind of figure out the style, where I want all the lines to go. And then once I have that figured out, I go through frame by frame, and instead of drawing the entire hand, I'll just follow like one line and do a pass through everything. And then I'll go back to the beginning and I'll start on a new line. And this is a better workflow and it leads to much smoother results. So then this step takes the longest, I would say, because you have to draw every frame by hand. But once you're done with it, you can get into the step where you fill with color. So this is kind of what I was explaining earlier, how I recommend if you're going to be doing a lot of colorways, like I knew I was going to be doing with this hand. I just duplicated the layer, and for every single color I used, I put it on its own layer, and then I just used the fill bucket to sort of fill colors in. And then when it came time to export, I exported the outline separately from all the different colors. So I had, I don't know, like 5 or 6 different image export sequences. Then I bring it all into After Effects where I do my compositing. So I start off by making like one pass of the hand where I'll stack the outline and then all the color fill layers. As you can see, there's a bunch of different colors of the hand, so I'll make a different comp for each hand, change the color, and then I can bring it all together in one final composition and really manipulate things, make the hands sort of fan out, add that final rotation, play with scale, all that good stuff. Kind of do all the finishing touches there.
Amazing. I wish all my guests could have a presentation like that. I won't make anyone do that though. It seems like I'm gonna be giving people homework.
Oh my gosh, this is like a very condensed version of all the things I do. Though I could get into it, but yeah.
I mean, I think that's like but that's like a perfect compact way to describe your process. When you're like working on stuff like that, do you pretty much have like a pretty solid idea of what the final product's gonna look like? Or are you like playing around while you're doing it a lot?
I would say again, it depends on the animation. Sometimes I go into it knowing exactly what it's going to look like during like when it's finished. And then with some of my like trippier, more pattern-based animations, a lot of the times I kind of start off with like a basic idea and then I'll just go crazy and have fun. That's what's great about working in a digital medium. You can like iterate forever and ever. So I'll do all these iterations and then I kind of pull it together into a final piece. I really like to kind of go back and forth and be open during the process. If I discover something on accident that I love, I don't want to be so strict that I kind of ignore it or leave it behind. I like to be open enough that I can incorporate like new surprises or leave myself room to sort of continue to think on things later down the line.
Yeah, because I feel like especially with the head ones, because I've seen you've done that technique a lot in your work with like the splitting head and having things come out. Where did you get that idea? Because I feel like that's, even looking at it, it's like, whoa, this is like so cool and trippy, and like I feel like, how did you even come up with that in the first place?
Yeah, so that one that I just shared with the dog initially came from my notes app, and I think the note for that particular one was like doggy pinata. And even though it didn't end up like a dog pinata, I think the idea of like having things kind of explode from this dog's head, that's where it was born from. And in terms of like style and sort of where I got how to work in that way, I would say Sholem was a really big influence. He's like the master of sort of like the cut up head animations and like
Okay,
taking cut up
Sholem.
footage. Yeah, Sholim.
Okay.
Look his stuff up. He's really cool. But I think I started there, and one of the first I did was I have an animation of like a baby's head, and it's like doesn't have eyes, and it kind of splits open, and there's like an apple inside of it. So I had a lot of fun doing that, and then I don't know, I just kind of fell in love with that style and like that motif, and I kept going with it.
I was trying to look up Sholem, but I don't think this is the right guy. Sholem, what was it? Does he have a last name?
If you search Sholim, his full name is, he's Serbian, so
Oh, I see.
it's
Okay.
Milos
I think I put an E
Rajkovic.
instead of an I. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay.
Yeah, he is like king of the split open head style. I mean, it's a different style than I do it, but I was definitely inspired by him.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I feel like I may have seen this guy's stuff before in passing somewhere, but now that I'm seeing them in motion,
Probably is. Yeah, he's pretty big. He's been around for a while. He's like a established artist, I know.
nice. On that topic, do you have any other artists or agencies or anything that you take a lot of inspiration from?
So many. Wow. Where to begin? Okay, hang on. Let me pull up some. I think there are different artists at different times that have really influenced me. Too many to say, but I wish I could say them all because I don't know. I'm always like in love with everyone's style. Someone who is really kind of influencing me right now as I'm trying to get into more character based animation and like developing characters is Rahman Jafari. And they're I think, French based animator, but I think they live in Berlin.
Okay.
But look up their stuff. They're fantastic. I worked on like a project with them for
Oh,
uh,
really?
Absolute Vodka at one point, and I was like, "Oh my god, yeah!" It was amazing for me because I have been their fan for a long time.
Oh, that's so awesome. And it was just like happen chance, like you didn't know they were going to be on the product.
I didn't, and then I got paired with them, and I was like, "Wow, I'm a huge fan."
That's so
So
cool.
that was cool. Yeah, and then in terms of like other agencies, honestly, if I could sum them all up, I am repped currently by Snyder in the US, and they have a lot of fantastic artists on there. So if you go to their site, I really am also influenced by a lot of the other artists that are up by them.
Okay. Snyder, is it like Snyder Studios or do
If you
they
search
just go
like
by Snyder?
Snyder Agency, let me see. I think it's We Are Snyder. Is the yeah We Are Snyder is like the URL.
Okay, okay.
But like Marilu Farr, I love Lulu Zhao, Thomas Brian King, John Ionetta. Sorry for all the names. I am butchering.
Oh
Erica
yeah, yeah, I can
Jacobson,
see a lot of your inspiration. Yeah,
Robert Lobel. I'm also like really obsessed with right
they
now.
all have very, very bright colors and like clean lines.
Yes. I love both those things. I also love texture, but again, sometimes texture when it with animation is just hard because texture requires like so much time and love, and when you have to do that over like 50 frames,
Yeah,
it's gonna kill your wrist.
yeah, I've like done some texturing. I mean, I like throwing textures in some of my work. But yeah, definitely if it comes to like like frame by frame animation, it's just like I've done it a few times, and every time I'm like, oh, this is hard. Like, why did I do this? And it's also hard
Yeah.
to make it actually look good because when you're doing like a lot of times I use like a noise brush and I'll be like
Yes.
trying to like use the same area, and then when I watch it back, it's like too muddy.
It's like it gets too crinkly. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's why in a lot of like my illustrations, I will get more into texture and stuff because I think it just that is where it lives in my world. But I do know other animators and artists that really go in depth with texture, and I have a lot of respect for them because I know how difficult that is.
yeah. I know before you did mention a little bit about just kind of like getting through creative blocks. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have any like specific things you do, or whether it's like I don't know? I mean, I don't want to talk for you, but yeah, like whenever you're hitting
Yeah,
creative
I
blocks,
definitely
like we
do.
all do.
Okay, so I think when I'm hitting a creative block, when I'm like looking at my notes pad and like nothing is coming to me, if I have the time, I like to maybe like go on a walk outside or just do something out of my house that is like not
Hmm.
related to animation at all and kind of reset my brain. And then when I come back, oftentimes things will come to me faster. Also, going to any type of like museum, or even if it's not art related, if I'm like learning something new, that often sparks ideas and like just kind of gets my brain moving in a new direction. Because I think most of the time, at least for me, like I have the same maybe like 10 general thoughts tumbling through my head every day, like if I, go through the same routine.
Hmm.
So I think when you get out of that space and you enter a new one, it like stimulates a part of your brain that can lead to more creative results.
Right. Great advice. Do you ever feel like it's hard for you to stick with doing like the same style? Or are you ever like really itching to like try like experiment with other stuff? Or are you pretty much always happy to rotoscope?
That's a great question, because I think right now I'm at a crossroads of like, I want to try something new with character animation. And so I've been doing a lot of that, but I haven't posted it yet because, I do have an established style and I don't want to post something before it's ready. But that being said, I think I experiment all the time, and it's maybe in subtle ways that, like, if you look at my body of work, at a glance, you might not realize it, but I'm using like new brushes, new techniques, like all the time, trying different things with like camera and After Effects. So even though maybe it all looks the same because it's coming from me and like my ideas are, I guess, from the same area or float around the same general topics, to me, it still feels like something new. And that's what I would say one of the big new things I started getting into last year was even just animating over like live footage way more, has been a lot of fun. And then also like getting into some textured work, like some of my animations aren't done with like that clean outer line, and I've had a lot of fun kind of experimenting there.
Like using textured brushes?
Yeah, and also like in illustration, trying out new techniques, trying out new colors. So again, I think, to me, like I feel like I'm trying a lot of different things, but perhaps because it is all me and I'm like that one artist, it looks cohesive in a way that makes like people can still see it and be like, oh, that's a Helen Ratner. Because I think there's always kind of a thread, whether it's like a colorway or a topic of, conversation, or a style of animation. Like there's always like something similar in all of them, even if like the way I animate it or the topic is different, or it's like brighter colors or
Yeah.
darker colors. If you look through, there is definitely variation, but I think it is probably more subtle to those that aren't as close to my work as I am.
Yeah, I mean, when I initially like look at your Instagram and stuff, yeah, it definitely just seems like very cohesive, which is nice. I wish my stuff was more cohesive because I struggle with that a lot too. I mean, I just love experimenting so much, and then it's like hard for me to,
I think it's a double-edged sword,
yeah,
because once you kind of like have that style, people sometimes expect you to stay in it, which I think if you like it, sure, but
yeah,
I think people should always be trying something new. So, the stuff that I have online on my Instagram is only like one facet of the art that I put out there, but I have lots of art that I do that I don't post that is completely different. And I don't know, maybe someday I'll get into it more.
hmm,
But yeah, I think as long as you're enjoying the process, like that is to me what matters the most.
What have you been doing with character stuff?
It's a good question. I just started and I just kind of want to get into more character based worlds. And again, I've been working, I've never felt that I was really great at drawing, which is a skill I've always wanted to get better at. So for a while, I've kept a sketchbook and I try to draw on it every day. And usually I'll draw from life. But I kind of recently want to just be able to draw from my imagination and like kind of create these worlds more off the cuff and not be as beholden to footage. So just kind of experimenting with new characters, different shapes, and just having fun. And, it's still a new process for me. I don't think I'm ready to kind of put it out into the world, but I'm hoping, one day it'll get there, at least in like the illustration form, and then perhaps like go into like full animations at some point in time.
Nice. Well, yeah, I'm excited to see that whenever you start posting those. Hopefully,
Thanks. Me too.
but
Yeah, we'll see what
yeah,
it
it's
is.
that's exciting. I mean, it's exciting to like, yeah, start kind of diving into an
Yeah.
area that's like unknown to you.
But again, I'm like right now, like I said, like Ramon is one of my big inspirations. So kind of like their work and what they do is what I would love to do, in my own way someday.
Yeah, this is kind of, I don't know if I would say off topic, but have you ever heard of this app PX12? I just found out about it today.
No, what is it? Tell me more.
It's this animation app that this guy he's like an art director at Adult Swim. he like
Uh-huh.
developed, and I just started messing around with it today, but it seems like something that would be up your alley. But it's kind of made like it's not a traditional animation app. It's made as like almost like a yeah, like DJ like for like a video J VJ.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So it's kind of like
Like,
made
yes,
to do it live. So
that's
everything
cool.
you can like make all these different lines and like draw different textures, and it all moves constantly, and you can like adjust how it
I
moves.
think I've seen this. Is this like you can kind of draw a line and it'll like send these like
Yeah.
particle
Yeah, like I
things?
started messing with it. This is just some random thing. I was like, I don't know if you can see it.
What's it
It
called?
might not.
PX9.
Yeah, it's not
Oh
gonna
yeah, yeah,
focus.
yeah. I have heard of this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
No,
just
that's
like
really
all these
fun.
everything's just like moving around and stuff, but yeah, seemed like something that would I don't know, maybe you could experiment with. Cuz a lot of the colors that's in it, it's kind of hard to draw stuff without it being like super bright colors and stuff cuz there's like all these
Hmm.
rainbow effect brushes and stuff, but I don't know, maybe something worth checking out.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, there's so many programs I'd love to dive into. Also, like Blender Grease Paint looks really cool. I would love to play with that someday. And then maybe get into 3D stuff, but
Yeah.
mm, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah, the 3D stuff, it's like a whole other beast. It's worth it
Hmm.
though. And Blender, I feel like is the way to go because it's a free program. So there's like it's like similar to After Effects. There's like a million tutorials on YouTube that
Hmm.
you can just be like, how do I add fog? And then you look up fog and Blender on YouTube, and there's like 50 tutorials on how to do fog. So,
Nice.
but yeah, I've been wanting to dive back into Grease Pencil and Blender because there's another artist that I follow. He developed some new like grease pencil tool that you
I
can
just saw it.
you
I know
saw it
exactly
where
what
you
you're
can draw
talking
like the little
about.
lines
Yes.
and then
I
it
feel
just
like he's the
animates
king
for you.
of grease pencil. Yes. Everyone's like this artist, and I was like, he is
Yeah.
grease pencil.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, yeah, he's like I saw some interview with one of the developers at for Blender, and they were like, "Yeah, we just kind of made it for people to like put notes and stuff like on their 3D stuff." And then there was like that artist who like made just everything into like 2D, 3D stuff with grease pencil. And they were like, "Whoa, we didn't know you could do that."
I love that. Yes. Experimenting with things as they shouldn't be done.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Developers didn't
that's
even have
cool.
that in mind.
Let me know if you check it out because it looks like magic because he just like draws in the paths
I
of
know.
the
I was
motion. I'm
like,
like,
how does that work? How does it know? I mean, it has to do. It probably has to do with like AI.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which like that's the good type of AI. That's the type of AI that I want for my work.
Yeah, same. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, aren't you worried about AI kind of like stealing into your work and doing all this?" And I do understand that there are like some very real ethical issues about like stolen art with it, but I think, as those kind of get more resolved over time, because I don't think AI technology is going anywhere,
Yeah,
I'm excited for like what it can open up in the animation field. Because I know that if I were alive before like digital animation was really a thing, I probably wouldn't be an animator at all. Like doing everything by hand on
that's how I
paper,
felt too. Yeah,
I don't know that I could do it. I
yeah.
rotoscope. It would be really hard.
Yeah, or just like yeah, it's just so time intensive and like I don't know. Then what if you like draw a frame and then like you spill coffee on it and then it's like now I have to redo this whole thing?
Yeah.
I'm
And from
sure.
what I can see, AI is still like only as good as the human input. It's only as good as the idea that a human has. It hasn't gotten to the point where it's like a full consciousness and can just like develop something interesting on its own, in my
Hmm.
opinion.
Yeah, I've been seeing some stuff that like people are developing AI in a good way for artists and animators to just like kind of do some in betweening for you and stuff, which I think
That
that's
would be
another thing
nice.
that's like double-edged sword because some people it's like their whole job is being an in-between artist, but
I
then at the same
know.
time it's like opens the door for you to be an independent animator and like not have to
Yeah,
spend a bunch of time or like rely on hiring people. You can just like
definitely.
animate whatever you want.
I do think sort of styles that are more like showing the human hand. Like if you've seen like Spider-Verse, Enter Spider-Verse, or like
Yeah.
there was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that came out a few years ago, and it was like this 3D 2D, and it was very like hand done. I have a
Yeah.
feeling like that's probably gonna make a comeback because as things become easier to do, it's the styles that are like harder and require that human touch. I think are gonna really stand out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love that we're starting to like combine 2D and 3D because I had no interest in 3D for the longest time until like into the Spideyverse, and I was like, oh, damn,
Same. That's
it's
what
like
changed
that
it for me.
looks
That and
cool.
like grease pencil. I was like,
Yeah,
ah, I see use case for you now.
yeah, because I think that was the whole thing with 2D for me. That why I liked it better than 3D was the like it mostly being on 12 frames per second. Like it just has a better
Yeah.
look to it, I think, than like the ultra smooth. Everything's like high definition. So once they implemented that into 3D, I was like, oh, they might have gotten
Yeah,
me
from
into
what
3D now.
because I feel like everything in 3D was heading towards like basically being live action for a while, and I was like, why don't you just shoot it? Like it's probably going to be easier. And so
Hmm.
then I feel like they hit the pinnacle of like, okay, we've made things look too realistic. Like now what? And that's where things got more interesting for me, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad Sony took a chance on that because I feel like most studios would be like, nope, it doesn't look like Pixar. We can't do it.
Yeah, I want more.
Yeah. Yeah, I also love the Ninja Turtles movie. That one was great too.
Yeah, fantastic style.
What do you feel like is the hardest part of animation for you that somebody in the industry wouldn't understand? Or someone not, did I
Mm.
say that right? Somebody outside the
Oh yeah,
industry
yeah.
wouldn't be understand.
I think the biggest challenge that I kind of face generally is two things. I guess one, just people understanding the sheer amount of time that it takes and like human effort and like, I've kind of like destroyed my arm in the process of animating for so long because I love it.
Hmm.
So I don't think a lot of people realize like just the amount, like it looks smooth and it like especially with rotoscoping, like it looks tied to live action. So I don't think people understand that like there's still like design decisions that go in and like you still have to figure out a lot. It's not just like taking this footage and then it turns it into that. And then I would say in terms of clients, one of the biggest things that I kind of always have to start by explaining is like once I begin animating, it's sometimes really hard to change certain things after. So, especially with my process, I like to do like a lot of stuff in the upfront, like overshow keyframes, really explain motion, like make sure that everyone is on the same page. Because once I dive into like, the actual hand drawn animation part, like it has to be pretty locked in certain
Yeah.
ways. Otherwise, it's like you kind of have to completely redo it.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think most people run into when working with
Yeah.
clients and stuff of like, oh wait, can you just go back and like change this thing? And you're like, no, that was like
The
like
amount of
it's a
times I've
whole other
had someone be
character.
like, "Can you create like just a short 30-second video for me, fully rotoscoped?" And I'm like, I can tell you just, you're not like being a dick. You just don't know what goes into this."
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. A lot of times they think it's like a secret button that we have.
I
They'll just
know
turn into it.
it's not. It's all done by hand.
Yeah.
So painstaking.
Do you have anything else you want to share? Anything, I don't know. Yeah, you want to
Hmm.
add or any other like upcoming projects that you have?
Yeah, I guess one thing I want to add is I know that I've been mostly talking about like my personal work, but to be honest, a lot of the work I do is with agencies and it's more in like sort of a 2D motion graphic style, collage. And, if you go to my site, you'll see a lot of that more client based work as well. And I love doing it as well as, my personal stuff. I think both have merit and like a spot in my heart. If I was just doing one style all the time, I don't think I'd be happy. So I really like mixing things up. And I guess Oh, one shout out that I feel like since we're talking about rotoscoping, to me he's the king of rotoscoping. Mitchell Pond, who is yes, I think that's his name. Yes, his Instagram is Man Mantis, but he is like maybe the best rotoscoper I know.
Okay. I'll check him out. Shout out Man Mantis. Yeah, I'm really glad I had you on because I didn't realize you didn't have like a background in drawing or art, which is really cool because it's, a lot of people like want to get into animation, but maybe they don't know how to draw. And I think you're a perfect example of like showing like you don't need to know how to draw. If you want to go do
Yeah,
animation,
you
you
could
can
just
do
finish it up.
rotoscoping. Like there's so many other ways to experiment with
Definitely.
rotoscoping. I feel like a lot of people, when they think of rotoscoping, maybe they think of like those old like Lord of the Ring animations or something that like when they used to just
Yes,
back in the 70s when they would just like rotoscope everything to like animate them. But uh but yeah, there's like so much you can still do with it. It's not like
definitely.
you have to stick
I
to
mean,
it.
I did go to school for fine art, but it definitely didn't teach me anything about animation.
Yeah.
And I guess, I do want to say like you do have to be able to draw to some degree. Like there are design decisions that need to be made even when you're tracing.
Yeah, the way you have to
but
like
you don't
think
have to
about
be,
simplifying things.
and like you do kind of have to understand general like perspective and like the volume of stuff, especially when footage gets blurry. Sometimes like I am just kind of making it up. So that's why I am always working on my drawing skills. And I would say they've gotten a lot better. But yeah, I would say don't ever let like the fear or lack of a specific skill hold you back from just like creating something. Like start anywhere and just, follow what you enjoy. And if you enjoy it, it shows.
Yeah, 100%. It's great advice. On your like client work, for anybody who wants to do that type of animation work, because obviously there's like the commercial client based stuff that you usually do, and then there's like a million other avenues of animation of like working on a TV show and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So for people who want to do the type of work you do, like what advice would you give them for getting started or trying to get your foot in the door?
Okay, so I would say like once you have your style, like once you have your actual creative like skills and chops like good enough to work there, and you know, I guess if you want to like start out as a junior or something specific in the industry, maybe you don't even have to be all that extensive. Cold emailing has gotten me really far. And then also the book, The Freelance Manifesto by Joey somebody. I think the
Yeah,
motion design
Joey.
school dude.
I have it like right over here
Cornerman
somewhere.
or something. But
I
yeah, that
actually have it
book
right
was
here.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yes.
Joey Corman.
Yeah. Highly
Cornman. Yeah.
recommend that book. I think he gets into like the nitty gritty of emailing. It's a few years old now, so just keep that in mind with like some of the specifics. But yeah, great resource.
Yeah, you're the one that recommended me that book, and you were also, I guess I should mention that you're also the person who influenced me to just go full time into freelance a
Yes.
year
How's it been
ago.
so far?
It's been pretty
Congrats.
good.
A full
It's
year
been,
in.
yeah,
That's awesome.
I've been enjoying it. It's been a little slower this year than it was last year, but also I wasn't freelancing yet until like April, like, yeah, mid end of April. So we'll see. It's been picking up.
Yeah.
Clients' work has been picking up again, which is good.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I'm enjoying it. Yeah, it's a scary avenue to go down, but it's definitely worth it if you want to like grow your client base and grow as an artist. Yeah, it's
Definitely.
definitely worth it.
I love it. Read Freelance Manifesto. I will end on that.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks so much, Helen.
Sweet. Thanks for having me, Mitch.
All right, and there we have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and got something out of it. Lots of good insight into what it's like being a freelancer today in the motion design and animation industry. Thank you again, Helen, for coming on the podcast. Really enjoy having you on. Thank you to my buddy Nick Hasselmop for letting me use your music for the intro and outro to these. That about wraps it up. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll be back next Saturday with a new animator to see how they made it. See ya.